We are live, stealing Mike Goldberg's line. I'm James Lynch. How's everyone doing? That's John Coe, JHK, joining me here. Producer Michael in the back, always making it happen here. Welcome to the Fantasy Fanatics MMA podcast. If you haven't watched the show before, basically we preview an upcoming notable fight. And on today's episode, we're going to be looking at the rematch that they just announced last week. Israel Adesanya taking on Marvin Vettori. That's going to be coming up in June. So we're going to go through the entire fight, give our picks, give our analysis, dig into this thing really deep. But before we get into that, always got to remind our audience, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and more importantly, download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. It's awesome. I went 12-1 on my picks last week. I got to brag for a little bit here because that doesn't happen. Probably won't happen for a while. So if you want to go on there and talk about how much more of an expert you are than I am, then download the app and you can join our group here and also make your picks. And again, the app is amazing. We're going to be referencing it here throughout the show. So go download that app. It doesn't matter if you're iPhone or Android. They got it on every platform. So it's all good. But before we get into it, John, how are you? How's everything going?
Good, man. Everything's good. The weather's good. Life is good. Nothing to complain about.
Yes, and killing it with the interviews as usual. If you missed our live stream on Saturday night, we did the UFC 261 hangout stream. What a card to do that for with all the reactions and everything. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for the show, whether it's on this fight or on some other stuff, we'll talk about it right after the breakdown. So let's dig into it, John. This is a rematch. We talked about this. They fought way back in, I'm just bringing it up here, April of 2018. So not that long ago, but also kind of long ago if you think about it. And it was Israel Adesanya getting a split decision over Marvin Vettori. But before we dig into that fight and before we dig into everything, let's talk about the optics of this fight, right? I talked about this before, I think on this show, where, Robert Whittaker should have been the next, title challenger. Now, there are some things that I found out after the fact because when I saw this book, I was like, what is going on here? Why is Whittaker not getting the shot? But the more I dug into this a little bit deeper, I realized that this actually does kind of make sense. So what they're doing, basically, they want Israel back as soon as possible. If you think about the last time he defended his middleweight title, it was last year, right? Because he fought Jan Blachowicz, light heavyweight. So they want to get him back in there. They don't want to hold up the division. I understand that. Rob just had a war with Calvin Gastelum. He wants some time off. I didn't get a chance to watch Submission Radio's interview, but I suggest you guys go check it out after this show to get sort of an update on what Rob's doing. But he needed some time off. He didn't want to fight right away. Understandable. I would hope Rob gets the winner here. I would hope he doesn't have to fight a fourth contender just to get his title shot back. Of course, he's only lost one time at middleweight. So that's sort of the optics of it. Vettori was ready to go. Yes, he beat Kevin Holland. Yes, Kevin Holland's not highly ranked. Yes, he dominated Kevin Holland. Yes, he didn't get a finish. Those are all fair points. But the reality is that Vettori was at the right place at the right time. It worked out for him, and he's getting the shot. Just first, John, on the optics of this, I think it makes sense.
It does make complete sense because, like you just said, Robert Whittaker wants some time off. They want Israel to come back as soon as possible. And one thing about Israel is he's very active, man. Since he debuted, in 2018, right? Is it 2018, 2017? Yeah, 2018. He's fought continuously. I don't think he's taken longer than like a 6-month break. So yeah, it just makes sense. And I like the fight. They got history, and I love history between two fighters, man. And they go back and forth. They want to promote it the way I think a fight should be promoted, with some jaw jacking, and it's fun, man.
And let's also mention the fact that Vettori's really leveled up himself. We've seen the last couple performances, that Jack Hermansson's fight especially, that was a really big win. With Hermansson and the momentum he had from submitting Calvin Gastelum before that to lose a fight like that, Vettori really sort of gained some notoriety for being a contender after that. And we know Vettori can talk on the mic. He's getting really good at interviews. He's a passionate guy. He's Italian. So the buildup to this will be really good, especially with the fact that there is history. Now, that's something we'll dig into first before we get into the tail of the tape here. But I mentioned it, Israel Adesanya beating Vettori. Now, John, you watched this fight more recently than I did. I remember at the time I watched this, and I didn't have any connection to either guy. In fact, I think I'd interviewed Vettori a few more times than Adesanya at that point. So I remember watching that and being like, yeah, Adesanya won that, right? Like, no debate, shouldn't have been a split decision. What did you see when you went back and watched it? I was curious.
Exactly the same thing. There should have been any debate. It shouldn't even been a split decision.
Okay, I thought you were going to go the other way when you told me this. That's interesting.
No, because I thought, with my recollection, I thought it was like, yeah, it was a split decision. It was a close fight, what is it? Vettori took him down a couple times, but when you really go back and dissect that fight, the first 2 rounds, he couldn't take him down. He tried to take him down, but he couldn't take him down. Israel did a great job defending takedowns. And on the feet, he was doing phenomenal. He was beating up the front leg. He was hitting elbows. He was hitting the more significant shots during the first 2 rounds. And then when you get into the 3rd round, that's when Vettori actually got Israel to the ground. But he didn't do any damage. And Israel got up every single time. And by the time, he got back to the feet, Israel went back to what he was doing. He was beating up the leg. He was, hitting jabs, uppercuts. and he won the fight. I thought it was a unanimous decision. You know what I mean? I thought it was like 3 rounds to none. Third round, maybe you could give it to Vettori, but how much do you count a takedown if you don't do any damage with it, James?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then, a couple of things about that fight as well. That was Israel's second UFC fight. He fought 2 months earlier in his debut. People forget that. He fought Rob Wilkinson in his debut, UFC 221, February 2018. And then 2 months later, just a little over 2 months, because it was February 10th, he made his UFC debut. 2 months later, he fought Vettori on April 14th and got a split decision, but should have been unanimous. And then it's funny, I'll kind of just mention this as well, and then we'll dig into Israel in a second here. But after that fight, I remember I got to see Adesanya fight live. It was the fight after that. The Vettori fight was when he fought Brad Tavares. And I remember I picked Brad Tavares in that fight. And my reasoning was that I thought this was too much of a step up, right? Going from Vettori to Brad Tavares, a vet, who had I might have picked Izzy, but either way, I thought that Tavares was going to be, show a little bit there in the fight because he had way more experience, right? And the thing is, Tavares good on the ground. We hadn't seen Israel really tested there, right? Vittori's mainly standing with them, so I thought whatever. But after watching that fight and the beating that Adesanya put on him, I was like, okay, I'm sold. I'm never counting this guy out again. And it was just a great fight. And you just sort of, and if you remember, that was the tough finale. He was the main event. It was the night before, and this is back when International Fight Week used to do a couple events during the week. So he was the Friday night from the Saturday card. I can't remember what the main event of that was. I want to say, I don't know if that was UFC 200. Can't remember, but either way, it was a nice, like, sort of a welcoming party for Israel Adesanya, with it being a main event and him beating a vet and Brad Tavares. So that's sort of what Adesanya did early on to sort of prove. And even then, it's funny because, like, as he went on, people are still doubting him. But I thought that fight for me was the Brad Tavares fight was the one where I was sold on Adesanya. So let's dig into it here, okay? So Israel Adesanya, the middleweight champion. Yes, he lost his last fight, but that was at light heavyweight, so he's still the champ. 31 years old. He's 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. And right now, producer Michael is letting me know that Israel Adesanya right now minus 270. The comeback on Marvin Vettori plus 250. I think the odds are right where they need to be. Adesanya did defend his title successfully back in September, getting that TKO win over Paulo Costa. Again, another fight where I saw a lot of people saying, "Is he scared? He wouldn't engage with Romero," and then he went out there and he silenced everyone. Like, this is why you have to look at the overall resume when it comes to fans, because people talk about how boring that fight with Romero was. Meanwhile, 2 fights before that, he had a fight of the year candidate with Calvin Gastelum. So you got to look at the overall resume. And I thought this Costa win was great because, again, everyone was buying into Costa, saying this is going to be the guy to knock out Adesanya. It didn't happen. Why? Because Adesanya is a great striker himself, and he totally outmatched Costa in that fight. Second round finish, super impressive. So as far as middleweight, and even him losing to Hyon, whatever, I don't think that hurts the stock. As far as middleweight goes, Adesanya has been pretty dominant. Your assessment of Israel Adesanya, John?
Complete domination in the middleweight division. You know what I mean? You cannot argue with that. Look at the resume. You know what I mean? He goes out there and beats every single top guy. And, when you doubt him, that's when he comes through with the big performances, right? Especially that Paulo Costa performance. You could blame it on the wine or the sleep or whatever you want to blame it on, but he went out there and destroyed him after Costa was, talking about he's going to go in there and annihilate him. And, a lot of people was drinking the juice. I was kind of drinking the juice a little bit too. Like, Costa, he was unstoppable for a while. He went in there with Yoel and went toe to toe and knocked him down and everything, right? And they were in a war, and he lasted through the war. So I was thinking, like, yes, hopefully he could lure him into a brawl, but it never happened. Adesanya was perfect in that fight. And now, he's going to get into this defense. I feel like riding off that title defense. I don't think he even thinks about the Blachowicz fight.
No. And that fight too, I mean, look, all the credit to Jan Blachowicz, great game plan, was able to, take Izzy down, hold him there. I think the size did play a factor in it. And plus, we don't really see Izzy on the ground because he doesn't let you get there. Brad Tavares had trouble with that. A lot of fighters have had trouble with that. Let's quickly do a scan of Adesanya's resume in the UFC anyways. We can forget about, the fact that he was knocked out in kickboxing. I know a lot of people bring that up. Adesanya's going to get knocked out. He's shown a pretty durable chin. If you look at the guys that he's fought, guys like Gastelum, guys like Brunson, guys like Anderson Silva. Yes, he's older, but still has knockout power. Yoel Romero definitely has knockout power. So this is a guy that I think has proven that he's got a good chin. Also has a lot of kickboxing experience as well. So that's something that I think benefits him in the octagon, in the sense that his striking is very technical. He's very good there. Really good wins though. Derek Brunson, first round finish. I know Brunson, had a bit of a rough patch. He's turned things around. Looking back now, still a good win. Anderson Silva. I tend to think the reason that fight went the distance was there was a lot of respect there. I feel like, if that was another aging vet that wasn't named Anderson Silva, I think Adesanya might have gone out there and finished it. And the Gastelum fight, look, look, it wasn't a flawless performance. Gastelum did drop him in the 4th round. We should point that out. But the fact that Adesanya persevered and came back and won the fight, I thought was great. I mean, it's funny because that fight with Gastelum is probably the closest we've seen to Adesanya looking human. Even with him losing to Jan Blachowicz, I've never seen Adesanya take so much damage in a UFC fight. And in that Gastelum fight, you saw his face was all puffy. It was an absolute war. But I like that fight for Adesanya because it shows that if he ever does get into deep waters, he can dig deep and get the win. And I know that's why he won the interim middleweight title at that time, was the fact that he was able to overcome adversity as well. The Whittaker win, that win looks amazing. I don't care what people say. People saying Rob's past his prime. Rob's not past his prime. He went out there and just beat Kelvin Gastelum. He's, he has one loss at middleweight, and that's Adesanya on a night where, it wasn't his best night. I think if they have a rematch, that fight could go very differently. So Whittaker win looks great. The Romero fight, whatever. It takes 2 to tango. That's what I look at that fight. I don't think it was Adesanya's fault or, whatever. It's both opponents needed to work on it. And I mentioned the Costa fight, very impressive. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the resume of Israel Adesanya. Very impressive for such a short period of time. And I think that's one more thing I want to emphasize before we move on to you is that who have we seen come into the UFC and take the world by storm like this? Like no one in such a short period of time. 2018 is not that long ago, right? Like if you think about it. So for him to already be champion, to already be this superstar in such a short period of time, we haven't really seen this since maybe like a Conor McGregor. If you think about it, like it's very tough to do what Adesanya is doing. So all the credit to him. Anything else we want to talk about Adesanya here, or do you want to move on to Vettori?
I just want to talk about the Gastelum fight. I think that is the most important fight for Adesanya because he had that like you said, the adversity, right? A lot of these champions, when they become a champion, they don't go through the adversity, right? So they're not ready for it while they're the champion. So I think that Gastelum fight is so important. It kind of reminds me of like that Anderson Silva Chael Sonnen fight. When he came back and triangle Chael Sonnen in the 5th round. I feel like that helps a lot with his confidence and moving forward, man. I think that was so pivotal for him to face Whittaker, Romero, and Costa and go in there and beat all those guys.
Yeah. And just a great resume. And we are getting to the point now where, I mean, this guy's beating everyone, right? And there are still some contenders. We got to point out, obviously, we want to see the Whittaker rematch. I'd love to see him and Darren Till Sunday, and I'd love to see Jared Cannonier in the mix as well. But outside of that, Adesanya's look pretty much flawless. So let's get into Marvin Vettori here. So Vettori, a little bit younger here, comes to us from King's MMA, 27 years old, 6 feet tall with the 74-inch reach. So if you look at the height and reach, Adesanya just a little bit older at 31. He's going to have a height advantage. He's 6'4" compared to Vettori, who's 6 feet tall. 74-inch reach for Vettori, 80-inch reach for Adesanya. That will play a factor in this fight, I think, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So, of course, Vettori coming off that win over Kevin Holland, which, had it been Darren Till, I think people would be a little bit better about Vettori getting the shot. Again, we talked about the optics of this, but let's say Whittaker was ready to go and he was passed up. It might be a tough sell to say Vettori deserves this coming off a win over Kevin Holland. Now, it's not his fault Darren Till got injured, right? But at the same time, Kevin Holland, we saw him get dominated by Brunson, and then he gets this fight with Vettori. Didn't really tell us too much about Vettori other than the fact that it went the distance. So, if you're looking good against the opposition you're facing, then all the credit to you. But the Darren Till fight, had he beat Till, I think that would have meant a little bit more him getting the title shot. But let's go all the way back to his debut. Believe it or not, I think people forget Vettori made his debut way back in 2016, getting a first-round submission win over Alberto Uda, who was 10-1 at the time. So that was a good win. People also forget that he lost to Antonio Carlos Jr. in the fight after that. So it hasn't been smooth sailing the whole time for Vettori. I need to go back and watch that fight because to be honest, I don't even remember it. So I don't know if it was close. Maybe it was a bad decision. I'm not sure. But either way, that was a loss there. Beat Vitor Miranda, who's been out of the UFC for a while. Went to a draw with Omari Akhmedov. Omari is a pretty decent middleweight. Don't take too much away from that. Lost Adesanya. We talked about that. We both thought he clearly lost. And then had a couple nice wins here over Ferreira, Andrew Sanchez. The Sanchez fight, I give him a bit of a pass because that was supposed to take place in UFC Vancouver. If you remember, I think Sanchez got staph infection. And then, because I saw Vettori, it was funny. I'll tell you the story real quick. Obviously, I live in Vancouver. I covered that card. I saw Vettori in the hallway and at the hotel, the Fighter Hotel. And I go, "Hey, Marvin, how's it going?" He's like, "Not good." And I was like, "Oh, what's wrong?" He's like, "Fucking pulled out, blah, blah, blah," or whatever. Sorry, I shouldn't swear in here, but you get what I'm saying. He was really upset and he was just so mad. And then, of course, we saw that later when his fight with Carl Roberson got taken off and they had that whole altercation in the hotel. So very passionate guy. And that's something that's kind of interesting with Vettori as well is, there will be some trash talk leading up to this fight. Will that affect Vettori in the fight? Because he's an emotional guy. It hasn't affected him so far, but those are some things to sort of keep note of. Of course, he went out there and submitted Carl Roberson in the first round. But, I don't put too much stock into that win only because of the fact we know that's the way you beat Carl Roberson. Brendan Allen did that last weekend, right? Glover Teixeira did that. Carl Roberson has a weakness on the ground. Vettori exploited it. Good win in terms of the outcome, but can't take too much away from that. To me, the fight you got to look at, we talked about the fight with Gastelum for Adesanya coming back and winning. To me, the fight for Vettori that you got to look at is the Jack Hermansson fight. Now, the optics of that, we should point out, Hermansson went through a couple different opponents, right? It ended up being Vettori. So, there were some weird things that happened in that fight, but nonetheless, Jack Hermansson, a very solid fighter. For Vettori to go out there and dominate him throughout the fight, what I ended up finding out later from speaking to Hermansson is he actually broke his orbital bone early in the fight. So he's basically fighting with one eye, and Vettori went out there and capitalized. So good win there for Vettori. The Hermansson win, I think, is the most important win he's had in the UFC so far. And then also just the activity, the fact that Vettori fought Holland back in April as well. So Vettori's solid. He's an all-around good fighter, comes from a great camp, King's MMA. They've got Beneil Dariush, they've got Calvin Gastelum. It's a good stable of fighters over there. So he's getting top-notch coaching here. So, in terms of this matchup, it does pose an interesting thing here to Adesanya. But here's the thing I think with Vettori, and I don't mean this as in a bad way, but he's not amazing at anything. He's just a well-rounded, good, solid fighter. He's good everywhere. He's got good ground game, he's got good stand-up, but he doesn't do anything extraordinary. But that's okay. I mean, that's what's got him the wins he's got. So that's my assessment of Vettori. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. And also he doesn't have that knockout power, right? We've never seen him go in there and knock any. I don't think he has a knockout. He has one knockout but it was with a knee in his whole career. The rest of his finishes are all submissions, right? But the thing is, what I like about him is he's emotional and he's passionate. And I think that takes you a long way, especially with the skill set that he has. So I think it's going to come down for him is to have a good game plan and execute that game plan against one of the best guys in the world and maybe ever in the sport. We don't know yet. And one thing that's good about Vettori is that his coach, this is his third time preparing for Adesanya. So that, remember when Alpha Male just couldn't beat Dominic Cruz? And, when the Cody Garber went in there and they studied him so much, and what did they do? They ended up being able to put together a game plan to beat Dominic Cruz, right? So I don't know, maybe there's something to that, but Vettori, I'm not, counting him out, but man, this guy, that Jack Hermansson fight really opened my eyes. That's what I look at as, and I think the Holland fight, because it was a late replacement, I believe that Vettori, they told Vettori, if you win this fight, you're going to get a title shot. Yeah. So just win the fight. So I feel like that performance, you can't really read too deep into.
Of course, yeah. Switch of an opponent, it's tough to sort of gauge. Great point though about the coaching. I didn't even think of that, about the fact that Gastelum's there too, and so they've prepared for him already. That is interesting. Maybe this is going to be the one where they crack the code. And the other thing we got to mention too, Adesanya's coming off a loss in MMA. That's a new thing for him, right? How's he going to handle that? Some fighters, you look at a Dominic Reyes who's fighting this weekend. It didn't work out for him against Jan Blachowicz. Granted, it's Jan Blachowicz, but you get what I'm saying. Some fighters respond differently to wins and losses. So I know it was in a different division, but that does have to be weighing in the back of his mind that Adesanya could have gone to superstardom with that win over Jan Blachowicz, but he didn't. Now he's back to being the champ. How's that going to play on him mentally? We'll have to sort of see with that as well. So there we go. All right, let's get to our picks here. I feel pretty confident saying this. We talked about the odds. We'll mention it one more time here. Again, download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. It's great. Again, you can talk a bunch of smack with John and I because we make our picks on there all the time. So Israel Adesanya right now, -270, Vettori +250. So in case people don't know how odds work, you have to bet $270 in Israel Adesanya to win $100. That's how it works. Conversely, if you bet $100 on Marvin Vettori, you make $250. That's how the odds work. So keep that in mind when you're doing the bets. But who am I picking? I got to pick Adesanya here. And in fact, I think -270 is generous. As good as Vettori's been, and that Hermansson fight is fresh in my mind in terms of the performance he put on and how great he looked, I just think Adesanya's better. I talked about how Vettori is well-rounded and good, but Adesanya does stuff that goes that extra mile. Finishing Paulo Costa, finishing Derek Brunson, overcoming adversity with Gastelum and coming back. We've never seen Vettori have adversity, really. If you think about it, I mean, the fights he's lost, again, I got to go back and watch that Carlos Jr. fight, but the Adesanya fight, it's not like he didn't have to overcome anything. It was just that, he fought a better striker. And the fact that Adesanya knows in the back of his head he's already got the win over him. Mentally, that's got to play on Vettori as well. Because here's what happens. Vettori loses this. He's at the back of the line. Adesanya, I don't think he's going to lose, but either way, he's big enough where, it would be much easier for him to get back in that spot than, say, Vettori. So I'm going Adesanya here. I think the big question is, are we going to see a finish in this one? Are we going to see a decision? it's tough because we've never seen Vettori really rocked or anything. And I tend to think his chin's going to hold up a little bit in this one. I would say if a finish is going to happen, I'm going to predict a later finish, maybe like a 4th or 5th round finish, believe it or not. I know that's, seems a little weird, but I think more likely than not, this goes the distance. I think Adesanya wins the decision. I think it's going to be decisive. There's going to be no split. It's going to be very, it's going to be one of those. This is how I'm going to predict the fight's going to go. Adesanya is going to look great. He's going to bounce back in a big way, but Vettori's going to show a lot of heart in this fight, more than we thought. His stock's going to go up even in a loss, and Adesanya, gets this win and then rematches Whitaker later this year. I'm calling it here now. What do you think?
Vettori, I feel like the confidence is there because he's been doing interviews after interviews, from fights back.
It's not with me. It's not with me, but
yeah. But he's been doing these interviews and he's been saying, I know how to beat Adesanya. I mean, I was in there with him already. So his confidence there, his maturity's there. You could tell already, right? He's a way different fighter from when he fought the first time, Adesanya. But the question is, can he handle the spotlight of the title fight, the main event? Pay-per-view, that's always something that I look at in fighters, man. But and also the other thing we mentioned earlier is the game plan. If he have a good game plan, can he execute this game plan against one of the best strategists probably in the game right now, which is Adesanya and his team. So with that said, I feel like if Marvin Vettori doesn't lure Adesanya into a brawl like how Kelvin Gastelum did, I don't think he has a chance of winning this fight. It won't really be that close, right? And yeah, with that said, man, I'm going with Adesanya too. I think Adesanya goes in there and he outdoes himself from the first fight. I think he goes in there and maybe, you say that Marvin has a chin. I think Adesanya is going to be able to test that chin and wear him down round after round after round and maybe get a late finish, but most likely it will probably be a decision. Yeah, I'm gonna ride with Adesanya in this fight, man. I think Adesanya is just at another level compared to all the other middleweights. I think the only closest middleweight is Robert Whitaker. I think he's the one that has the chance. Like he might be able to crack the code. You know what I mean? But other than that, I don't know. Marvin, man, if he comes in there and takes out Adesanya, like we've seen crazy stuff. Last weekend was crazy as hell, right? Mm-hmm. If he does that, man, that I don't know. I don't know anything about MMA.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know anything. We might as well just throw out all our knowledge at one point. No, I agree there. And by the way, I think if Whitaker and Adesanya were to fight now, if I was to set that line, I'd probably set Adesanya at like a -150, maybe a -200, but I'd give Adesanya a slight edge. But Whitaker's done so much over the last bit that's shown that he is still competing at a high level and he's not this washed up fighter. So funny. And I know I'm talking to like a small selection of fans. It still annoys me when I see people be like, Whitaker's done. He got knocked out. Like, no, he's good. He's good. So yeah. The line's right where it needs to be. I think -270 is good. I'll look at who else is on the card, might parlay that. I think you get some value there. But I like Adesanya all day in that fight.
But the thing is, I would like to add something about Vettori is that I don't think Vettori is his best version right now yet. I don't think this is the time to fight for the title for him, to be honest with you. I think if he would have fought Till next and gained some more experience with different styles, so I think Till is like the perfect fighter to fight before you fight Adesanya, right? To kind of prepare yourself for that kind of like that striking style. But he doesn't, Matt. It might be just too fast for him. You know what I mean? It might be just too fast, but I feel like he's getting better. And this might not be the first or only time he fights for the title. I think he could possibly fight for the title in the future too. I agree. If
he can learn from these fights and move on, I agree. If you think about it, he's got one contender win under his belt, and that's Hermanson, right? Adesanya had to go through Brunson, who I think was kind of like a mid-tier contender. Gastelum, obviously, for the interim title. The Silva fight, whatever. I mean, that was more of just like, I remember I didn't even like that fight at the time. I remember thinking, like, what are they doing? Like, Tavares even was sort of a gatekeeper at the time and everything else. So yeah, and I think so that's my thoughts on it too. I think the experience as well for Adesanya will serve him well in this fight, and we'll have to see what happens there. So there you go. Before we get to questions, just want to remind everyone, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way. It's an easy thing to do, and it really helps support the show so we can continue doing it. And also make sure you download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. Again, it's easy, it's fun, you can interact, and the interface is just awesome. Like, especially when it comes to, they got all the photos on there. You can pick the fighters, you can pick the method. It's great. And it's not just for UFC. They've got all the other promotions as well. So it's awesome. So go download that right now. All right, let's get to questions here. I'm gonna let you take this one here first. Unacceptable Chat Tree, which love that name. Who do you got in the Angla versus De Ritter fight tomorrow? You would know better than me.
Man, that is a difficult pick because De Ritter just beat him at middleweight and took his middleweight title. and did it pretty easily. Just took him to the ground and choked him out. But now the Ritter's coming in on like less than a week's notice. And we don't even know what kind of training the Ritter's been doing. We have no idea. It's a mystery. And luckily they're fighting at light heavyweight for the light heavyweight title. And Ung, he's been training, and it seems like he's found this new fire, and he's become this maniac, right? And in training and just preparing for this fight, he's just focused on fighting. That's it. He's not even worried about having the title, right? He's just worried about beating the next guy. And but man, it almost seems like De Ridder has the kryptonite for Superman in this fight. I don't know, man. It's a hard pick. My heart says go with Ong La, but then you're like, De Ridder just beat him like a couple months ago and choked him out pretty easily. But this is also at light heavyweight, and Ong looks huge right now. He looks huge, and he's been preparing for months. So I think I'm gonna go with Ung in this fight, man. I think Ung will be able to go in there and he learned from his mistakes in the first fight, and he has great coaching, man. He's at Sanford MMA. How many guys lose at Sanford MMA? Not many guys are losing from that gym.
No, and they just have so many good additions now. I just talked to Phil Hawes last night. He's going to be taking on Kyle Dawkins. You got Brendan Allen there. You got Rory McDonald there. Like it's Ian Heinisch apparently now is joining the gym, like officially. Brendan mentioned that to me because I was like, "How's that?" Because you guys are supposed to fight. But yeah. And by the way, Ong is a guy that they always reference. That guy's a great training partner. I mean, it's one thing to show in the gym about, you know, it's one thing to perform in the gym and perform in the cage, but at the same time, like for your teammates to continue to keep referencing you, I think that's a good sign. So. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I wanted to go back about the Brendan Allen and Ian Heinisch. Did they have beef, dude?
Like,
I
did.
remember,
Yeah.
I
well,
remember
here's the thing. It wasn't on Heinisch's end because I know them both very well. I've been interviewing them way before they were in the UFC. Heinisch is like, I don't know where this came from. Brennan, I think there's an issue because I feel like they were almost lined up to fight for the LFA middleweight title and it didn't happen. And then there's some issue there. And so they've all, you know, Brennan's for whatever reason had some sort of beef with them, which is weird because Brennan's like the nicest guy ever. But I mean, I don't know. I've seen the odd opponent kind of get under his skin. So yeah, I guess they're going to have to be buddies now because they're training.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're going to be training partners. They're like in the same division. They're like right there, right at the cusp of the top 15. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch them.
By the way, I want to figure out what's happened. I mean, this isn't something I'll obviously announce on air, but I want to find out the story of what happened at Factory X with Heinisch because it's not just him. A couple of the other guys left too. Chris Camozzi's left Factory X as well. He's actually fighting this Thursday for PFL. So I'm curious.
Is he at Glory now?
He's at he's at Genesis, which is where Heinisch was. That's where like what's his name? Anthony Adams is there. There's a few other. It's another gym in Colorado, and I know they also do some cross training over at Elevation as well. But I know Camozzi and Heinisch left, which is interesting because obviously
that's Gaethje's gym, right?
Yeah, exactly. Curtis Blades and all them. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyways, just that's sort of a side note. One other thing I wanted to ask you before we move on to the other questions: how's One Championship doing in terms of and forget about what they're saying, right? Because we know they exaggerate some things when it comes to their numbers and stuff. But how are they in terms of like what have you been hearing from your sources or whatever in terms of how the viewership's going in the States? Because I've watched a little bit here and there. I'll be honest, it's just tough to catch up on everything. Like if I watched every MMA event, I'd probably be divorced, right? Like I need to spend time with my kid and my wife, so I can't have to prioritize things. But how, from what you're hearing, how are things going on that end, just for their North American sort of viewership?
From memory, the first TNT card, right? It was the one with Eddie Alvarez and Demetrius Johnson, and that one I think got the least amount of viewership on TNT. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it was unfamiliar to the audience on TNT. It seemed like they didn't do much advertising, even though it came on after AEW. I'm sure like people mention AEW as like the lead into One Championship. It helps them bring in that crowd, the pro wrestling crowd. But I guess it didn't in the first show. But all that controversy, right? Eddie Alvarez getting DQ'd. I think Mighty Mouse getting knocked out. I think that actually helped them get more viewership in the next shows because the next show was Christian Lee. And Christian Lee is not, let's just be honest, he's a great fighter, but he's not very popular. But because of that, the noise of the first show, I think more people tune into the second show, and the third show got real good numbers. I think it was like 300,000 viewers. They're talking about it was better than Bellator's viewership. I don't know what they're comparing, to be honest with you, because Bellator doesn't release numbers anymore. They're on Showtime. I believe I haven't seen any numbers for
I haven't either. No, you're right about that.
So, but I think they're comparing like last year's shows, right? So they're getting like 300K a show, and I think that's pretty good for their first journey into the US market. It's not that bad, and they're having a show actually tonight, right? In the US. I think that probably will get good viewership. They got some good stars, And I think they're doing a good job, because you cannot doctor those numbers, right? Those numbers are coming from a third-party source. So
yeah, exactly, and not from the man himself. And also, I know you had some Contender Series news with the Asian fighters. We'll get into that a little bit later because we do have to get to questions here. Let's start first here with James saying, will we see Weidman back in the cage? So I initially, and we talked about this on the broadcast, it was kind of reactionary. Obviously, we're both like, no, probably not gonna come back. But I talked to John Anik, who's very close with Ray Longo. Anik was on my 1-2 podcast with Kendrick Johnson. And Anik seems to think he is coming back, but 36. I mean, I'm 36. I'm not that old, but still, I don't fight for a living. I do wonder, like, is it even worth it to come back? Like, where, like, even let's say he comes back in like a year, where's the division going to be when he comes back? So does he come back? I'm still going to say no. I mean, I would hope he comes back. It would be actually, I'll take that back. I bet he does come back, but I don't think he's going to do anything because it's just going to be like way too much of an uphill battle for him to even be remotely relevant in the top in terms of the fighters. And I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just looking at the optics here. He's going to be he's turning 37, I think, in June. He'll be 38 next year, close to 38. And then he's had all these injuries, he's had all these layoffs. Like, there's only so much your body can take, and it's unfortunate what happened. But I think he comes back, but it's going to be like a kind of a layup fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think maybe he comes back. Usually guys come back and they, like you said, they get a layup fight and they fight that fight and then they're gone, right? There's like, okay, I proved my point. Like, I could come back from a serious injury. But I would, if I was him, man, that's a crazy injury to come back from at that age. And he snapped both his legs. Did you see the picture? Like, I didn't think it like pierced the skin, but I guess it did, because if you look at the picture where he's laying down, you can see a little hole in the back of his leg, right, where it pierced.
I couldn't watch that. You're a braver man than me, John.
Yeah, no, it was just a picture. It was just a picture, right? Because you know why I noticed it is because Chris Weidman posted it and said, "Hey, you could see the little hole that my bone was sticking out." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even notice it until he said it." But yeah, I don't know. I would rather see him. I don't like to say fighters should retire. You never see me say that, but man, this one is kind of crazy with the age and everything, and it's gonna be a long recovery. And he can't walk for 8 weeks, and then after that, it's gonna take like, I don't know, like a year to even just to be able to train again. And he'll be like 37, probably hitting about 38 years old. I don't know, man. That's gonna be a rough journey back. Yeah, and I'd rather see him, use that knowledge that he's gained, man, and get into coaching. You know what I mean? Get into like mentoring. I think he would be great. Like the UFC could utilize him, like in a Forrest Griffin type of way, don't you think?
Absolutely. Here's your sales pitch. It's a piece of cake. I beat Anderson Silva twice. I know. That's as simple as that. Just keep it that simple. I beat Anderson Silva twice. He's considered one of the greatest ever. Anyways, there you go. Speedy recovery to Weidman, by the way. One great interview, great guy. We wish him all the best. We got Mark O'Neill in the chat saying, if Prohaska beats Reyes, should he fight a top contender like Rakic or get a title shot? I think it depends how he wins. But the Rakic fight makes a lot of sense. I think there's those two fan bases. They don't like each other at all. Austria and Czech Republic, and man, the Yuri fans, they've been coming for blood this week since I picked Reyes. So it's it seems like every week I'm seeing a new fan base. Last week it was Weili Zhang's fan base. This week it's Prohaska. But I would think I don't think he would get a title shot unless he finishes Reyes in the first round. Maybe he bypasses Rakic, but I would tend to think Rakic, it would be a little bit further ahead only because he's got more fights. I don't know. How do you gauge what Saturday's fight means?
Yeah, exactly. How does he win the fight? If it's a decision win, if it's a close fight, Rakic is probably further ahead. If Prohaska goes in there and he annihilates Reyes, right, just makes him look like he shouldn't even be in the top 5, then I think they're going to push Prohaska for the title. I think they like Prohaska. I think they love his viewership. He has a big fan base that he already had before he went into the UFC, and they follow him really closely. And he just has an exciting style, man. He's violent. But the only thing that's weird about it is whenever I talk to Prohaska or Blachowicz, they're kind of buddies, it seems like, man, because they don't really say anything about each other. They're not like, they don't really, it doesn't seem like they want to fight each other. I'm just saying, I'm just putting that out there. But I think Prohaska, if he goes in there and starches Reyes, man, I think this is a huge fight for Reyes, dude. Like, this is a major fight for him.
I'll give you my Cole's notes in case you didn't see my preview, but basically I feel like Reyes just had a bad fight against Blachowicz. I'm banking on that. I'm banking on the fact he had a bad travel. I think the Jon Jones thing's messed with his head. I think we're going to see a much different fighter here. And based off what we've seen in the UFC, I think Reyes has a chance to win. That's why I think he can do it. And I also think that Proska gets hit a lot. Like I remember watching that Volkan fight being like, he might get knocked out here. And then the opposite happened in the second round. So it's like, there's that, and then so we'll see. I mean, could Yuri go out there and knock out Reyes? Absolutely, but the evidence shows that Reyes has been knocked out once by the guy who holds the title. So I kind of hold that in high regard. Like you got to look at the level of competition of who these guys are fighting, and I think overall, if you look at the resume, even though Prohaska has way more fights, beating CB Dalloway and Fabio Maldonado and all these guys, it doesn't tell us enough as opposed to beating, say, like an OSP. And I know Weidman, yes, say what you want. I mean, still Weidman finishing him in the first round. No one's done that, right? So. Well, I guess Hall technically, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it's one of those things where I think you got to look at the resume there, but we'll see. It's a great fight on Saturday.
We both talked to Prohaska ahead of this fight multiple times, right? Because it just got delayed. Yeah, and Prohaska told you that, or told me at least, that first fight, he was just trying to play around and trying to try new things. But this fight coming in, he's not going to do that. He's not going to be playing around. He's going in there for the kill. So we might see something different. But like you said, Reyes, you could. He's performed so well up until that, Blachowicz fight, to where it's like, okay, maybe we might have to throw that out the window.
I mean, consider that, and I think people just forget that. I mean, if it wasn't a title fight against Jon Jones, they probably would have given him the win. I thought he won 3-2, but because it's the title fight for whatever reason, we've seen it time and time again. We don't need to get into that. They tend to give it to the champ. You got to beat the champ to beat the champ, that type of thing. But I had Reyes winning 3-2, but I don't think it was a robbery in the context of it being a title fight. But anyways, we spent way too much time on that. We got a good morning, gentleman from J Spec Driver 702. Good morning to you as well. Thanks for watching. It is morning here for me in the Pacific time zone. It's 8:35. Abs Talks. What's up, Abs? He says, I agree with JHK. Marvin is only 27 years old. Pretty sure he'll fight for the title again at some point. Exactly. Yeah. 27, especially at middleweight. A lot of these guys are in their 30s. Well, Till's young. Cannonier's a bit older. Whitaker's actually not that old either. Whitaker's only 30, right? Isn't he? Or 31? I forget how old he is. I'll have to look that up right now. But you understand that, like Vettori is younger in that division, so the chances of him bouncing back, Whitaker is 30. I was right. I agree with you. I think this could be not just the first time we'll see Vettori fight for a title. So we're in agreement there. J Spec Driver 702 says, how do you feel about the entire Eddie Alvarez 1 FC fight mishap, fair fix of the situation? With it being a no contest, I agree. I think that was the right call. What do you think?
Yeah, of course, man. I don't know. It's weird. It's like the committee that they have. I don't know. Like, it's sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. But I feel like Eddie Alvarez, they did him right with this one, man. And he's fighting tomorrow or tonight, right? So he's fighting tonight against, pretty much an unknown Korean fighter that just won a fight like the same day. It was just shown last week. And man, if he loses to him, I don't know where that puts Eddie Alvarez. Like, you lose to an unknown dude, like for real. Like, he's really unknown. Like, he just debuted 3 weeks ago. Now this is his second fight in a month.
I don't know. Weird, honestly, I didn't even know Alvarez was fighting tonight. I just thought he was doing the interviews because of the decision being overturned. So that just shows, that's crazy. That's a problem. I mean, if I don't know that, come on. And granted, that might be me. I've been so busy, anyways, to be honest. Here we go. Vipula Barnes. If Reyes wins, who should he fight next? Rakic, Smith, or Ankalaev? I think all those are good choices. I kind of want to see the Smith fight. And actually, I don't usually reveal this, but I'm supposed to be talking to Smith later today, so I'll ask him about that. Smith, on his end, he's told me this multiple times. He has no issue with Dominic Reyes. It's Reyes who has the issue with him. But I think if there's even a little bit of heat there, you do that fight just to because obviously Reyes is not going to be getting a rematch anytime soon. He just lost this year, so he's going to have to take fights in that top whatever. Maybe you go Ankalaev. I don't know. I don't think there's a wrong answer there, but I would kind of like to see the Smith fight just because there's a little bit of heat there, at least on Reyes' end. What do you think?
Yeah, Smith or Rakic, right? Those are, or did they fight already? Rakic? No, they didn't fight, right?
No, they haven't fought. No.
Yeah, right. So Reyes,
Rakic is another one. But then, I guess Rakic would make sense too. That's the other name that we didn't, or that's
what's the heat between Reyes and Smith?
I think it was something on Twitter. This was a couple of years ago. I want to say they fought. I want to say it's when Reyes fought. I forget actually because I've followed both for a while in terms of their careers. So. I'm not entirely sure, but it was just something. I think it was something said on Twitter. I think there was a fight that was in the works, and then I think one of them said that it wasn't offered. I don't know. So maybe I'll ask Smith about that a little bit more today if I do get a chance to talk to him. But slated to speak to him later today. Abs Talks again. Good to hear from you, Abs. He says, now that Jones is less first round management, do you think he is closer or further to getting us to see a fight with Francis? Okay, so a couple things about that. I'm under this assumption. I'm curious to know what you and your sources have been telling you. I've been under the impression that first round has sort of been sort of like a proxy for Jones the last couple fights. I've been hearing for a while that he hasn't been with first round. And I think the only reason Malky came out and said that after 11 years we're parting ways is because Derek Lewis is their client as well. And there's a conflict of interest. And this is something we talked about when this whole thing went down, was the fact that how are they going to navigate through that? I think they had to publicly, because like obviously people would be tweeting Jones being like, hey, what do you think of your management giving Lewis this shot when you couldn't get the deal done with the UFC? So I think for the optics of it, Malky came out and said that. But from what I've heard for the last couple fights, I won't even say before Anthony Smith, I heard that Jones was sort of doing things on his own directly with the UFC. So he might have been linked with first round, maybe not like officially, but as far as what I was hearing fight negotiation wise, I think Jones was doing it on his own. So this doesn't really impact Jones that much. But I've always wondered why hasn't like a big agency like a CAA or something that's beyond UFC has picked up Jones and handled that stuff for him, because he's such a big star. No, nothing against first round. And I know they rep NFL players and whatever, but like, why hasn't a bigger company gotten in the Jon Jones business? Is it because of his outside stuff? I don't know. But that to me seems like a guy that should be with a really like a management company that's beyond MMA. Like even like a VaynerMedia would be more established, because they're doing stuff not just with, you know, MMA fighters. They have clients in like creative stuff as well. So I don't know. That's my impression of it. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, I didn't hear about like him, you know, in the last couple of fights. I heard this fight that they were just kind of a proxy, and Jones was dealing with the UFC directly. But now he's gone. He split ways. I see the 3 top agencies that could pick him up, but the best agency would be CAA, because CAA.
That's what I was thinking too. They rep Francis, Rory McDonald, all those people.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what did cross my mind after our conversation last week with Manuel Cape. I mean, if Ali sleeps in there and gets Jones, my God, I think the Kawa brothers would lose their mind. I don't think that's going to happen though. But no, I do wonder, like, anyways, to answer Abs's question, I don't know. Because again, what I've sort of been told is that Jones has been sort of doing this on his own. So if that's the case, I don't think the first round thing even matters. I think it's more for Lewis to get that fight, because I think that's what they're doing now. They're going to move ahead because Jon wants all money. And I said my piece on this before. I argued with Jim West about this yesterday. Jones gets the same viewership as Wilder and Fury. And I know the boxers make more money, but Jones does have a case there. He's getting the same viewership as guys that are getting paid 3 times as much as he is. He's not even asking for Wilder and Fury money. He's asking for something a little bit more. I kind of see his side here, but then I also see the UFC side where it's like, look, Conor McGregor's making, you know, not as much as you're asking for, and he's getting 1 million pay-per-view buys. So there's 2 sides of it. I don't think it gets done. I think John's going to be on the sidelines for a while. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think he goes to CAA, Vayner, or he goes to Paradigm. I think those are the 3 main spots, because I think those companies can offer more than just MMA. They can offer, you know, like movies. They could offer commercials. They could offer so much more. You know what I mean? Like that's why Connor's with Paradigm, right? That's why, you know, Francis is with CAA. There's reasons why those big major names. And Vayner, look at Vayner. Their roster is insane.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Very interesting stuff going on in the management side of things. Okay, let's go to MH account 23. Don't know what that means, but I'll take it. He says, what do you guys think about Diaz versus Chimaev? Horrible matchup for Diaz. Of course, it's a horrible matchup for Diaz. The only thing I like about this fight is that it doesn't really affect the division, right? Because if Diaz, and we're talking Nick, not Nate. Obviously, Nate's fighting Leon Edwards. I mean, Chimaev's just going to take him down, and I mean, he might try and stand and trade with him, but if they had to set a line on that, I would put like -500 on Chimaev, maybe even higher, because all he has to do is take down Nick Diaz. I love the Diaz brothers. I think they're entertaining. Nick Diaz was one of my favorite fighters when I first started watching the sport, but their loyalty to their gym and not going to a wrestling gym has killed their careers in the sense of trying to have title aspirations. They will always be fan favorites. They can continue to lose 8 fights in a row. People are still going to say, oh, just wait, this one fight, they'll knock someone out. Like there's always going to be those fans. But yeah, I mean, the fight itself is not appealing at all, because I don't know anyone other than Diaz fans who would think that there's even a remote chance that Nick could win that fight. Chimaev would absolutely steamroll him. Look, if you're Chimaev, I'll say this right now, and I like the guy. I think it's good. You know, he's out there, you know, saying I want to fight at 205, whatever. I mean, you say whatever you want, but if you want to be the best, fight the best. Don't be fighting Nick Diaz. Fight. You know, if this guy wants to come back, like a good fight for him, depending on what weight class it is, would be like a ranked opponent. And you go out there and you get, because he doesn't have a ranked opponent win. Do that, and then we can talk about you being the greatest ever or whatever. Then we can start talking about titles. But this idea of him wanting to fight Nick Diaz. But part of it too, I'll just mention this and I'll get your thoughts, and I'm rambling on here, is a lot of these guys like TMZ, the people who get access to Chimaev, are always being like, would you fight Khabib? You know what I mean? Like they'll throw that in. Like I saw them talking to Usman about Jake Paul. Like I know that's a thing now, but like, come on, people, like that's never happening, right? There's no way Usman's going to fight Jake Paul.
that's just laziness on the interviewer's part, right?
And it's
Just like, oh, Jake
honest to
Paul,
God,
Conor
though,
McGregor. They just
I
throw
will
names
say
out
this.
there.
I hate to slag another media outlet, but like TMZ, if you go look at all their interviews, type in Habib, every single one of their interviews ties Habib to something. You're Alex Volkanovski. Would you fight Habib? Michelle Watterson, I'm sure. Would you want to fight Habib? Like, that's what it is. They always throw that in there for that clickbait title, and it's so lazy. You're right. Exactly. Like, find something different. Find a different angle here. Stop going with the lazy thing of like, would you fight Jake Paul? Would you fight Habib? That's always what they do, and it's so annoying. And it's almost predictable at this point, where if they get an interview, it's always like, hey, I'm interviewing I don't know, whoever. We got to talk about them fighting Habib or something, even though Habib's been retired. Anyways, your thoughts. I rambled on that.
Now it's Jake Paul. Now
it's Jake Paul. Exactly.
Habib's gone. Like, now it's Jake Paul. Yeah, but with Diaz and Chimaev, I think that's only good for Chimaev.
Yeah,
I'm just be real with you. That's only good for Chimaev. And Nick Diaz coming back after all these years. I don't know where his head's at. Why would you want to come back after all these years? Like, is it?
I'll tell you why.
Are you looking for a money grab? Is that what it is? Like,
remember my conspiracy theory last week? It's not. Yes. I don't even think it's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, the boxing.
It's fight out that contract, go to boxing, box the YouTubers. That's exactly their angle. That's why I think Diaz is fighting Leon Edwards, because I don't think that's a good matchup for him. Leon Edwards is not a big name. Yes, it could lead to a title shot, but it's never been about the titles for the Diaz brothers. It's been about the payday. So you finish out your contract as fast as you can go and do whatever boxing fight you want. And I told you this a couple months ago, the Diaz brothers were going to train with Canelo. I don't know if that ended up happening, but they're looking at boxing and going, hold on a second here. They're getting easier fights and a bigger payday, and we're stuck over here having to fight Benson Henderson and getting taken down 5 times in a row. Like, I see it from their point. So that's why Diaz is coming back. He wants to finish out his contract and, make some more money. That's my take on it. I'm not saying it's the right take, but that's what I think's happening. So.
And the UFC knows that, so they're going to give him the worst matchups. Something that they could,
because people will watch regardless. Because there's people out there who think if Nick Diaz fights Chimaev, that there are Diaz fans. This is true. We've seen this in the comment sections. There are people out there who think that Nick Diaz could knock out Chimaev. There are people like that.
Yeah,
it exists. Where does same question from MHA account? MH account. Where does UFC 261 rank in all-time best wildest pay-per-views? In terms of wildest pay-per-views, top 3, maybe top 2, wildest. In terms of top all-time, you got to kind of look at some of the other. I mean, not every fight was a slam dunk, right? On UFC 261, most of them were, but it's up there. If you wanted to say top 5, I'm not going to fight you on that. But I mean, there's been some great pay-per-views over the years.
Just the pay-per-views portion, it's probably top 2, right? Like,
217's got to be up there.
Yeah, it's up there, like top 3 at least. You know what I mean? UFC, what was it? 100 was pretty insane too, right? That pay-per-view portion of that card. So I don't know, but yeah, it's up there, man. But we're gonna see something wilder in the next couple of years, and we're gonna even be like, oh yeah, that's just like 261. You know what I mean? That's the sport. We love it. That's why we love it. It's the wildest.
J Spec Driver 702 says, remember how popular Strikeforce became when Kimbo lost? When Fedor lost, and made them more popular. I don't agree with that. First off, Kimbo fought in Elite XC. I know they had a partnership at the time, but that was an Elite XC fight that he lost to Seth Petrozelli, right? It wasn't Strikeforce. I'm like 99% sure on that. So there's that. And then the Fedor losing, I mean, his first loss was to Verdum and Strikeforce. I don't know if it made Strikeforce more popular. I think they just put on good fights. I don't think it really had anything to do with Fedor losing. I don't know. Am I off base here? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if fighters losing makes someone else more popular, like organization more popular. I think fighters winning makes organizations more popular, right? Like, I don't think it works in the reverse. So yeah.
We got Michael saying, what sets Whitman apart from other coaches? What's different about his game planning and his style of striking for MMA? I'm not smart enough to determine that. I will say one thing I do like about Whitman in a way is that you rarely does interviews, not a front-facing guy like some other coaches are. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here, but I think that's part of the reason he's found success is that he's in the background. You hear him get referenced. He does, I know, the odd broadcast, there as well, but I think the fact that he's just focused on his clients and he's also not overextending himself. Like, and this is no disrespect when I say this, but a guy like Eric Nixick, think of how many fighters he has to coach. With Whitman, he's got Usman, he's got Rose, he's got Gaethje, but there's not a lot of fighters that he has to really work too much on. Even those elevation guys, they're being coached by other people. Like a Corey Sandhagen is not going to have Trevor Whitman in his corner, So I think it's also because he knows how to manage. He picks his fighters he wants to work with, and he has success. Same thing with Jason Perillo, same sort of thing. Like, good coach, works with very few fighters, doesn't put himself in the spotlight that much. I think that's one of the reasons that he's very successful. It's just my theory.
Yeah, you said it. He only coaches 3 fighters, I believe. Rose, Gaethje, and Usman. Also, he has like 20 years more plus of experience, and he's been around some of the best coaches in the world, and he's coached guys a long time ago. You just didn't know about it. You know what I mean? I think he was coaching Rashad Evans back in the day when he was a champion. He was down at what is it, Jackson's, working with that team over there. You know what I mean? It's not like he just sprang over like the last 5 years, man. This guy, he's been around for a long time, and it's just he's reaping the rewards now. You know what I mean? Like he just goes in there, and he's a likable guy. When you see him, when his fighters win or lose, he reacts the same.
Yeah,
which is
did you see
crazy,
the like
right?
no emotion when like Rose won? It was crazy. I don't know how he does it, but there you go. J Spec Driver 702 is asking us about the Lombome versus Hughes fight. I guess we have that card on Saturday. We can talk a little bit about it. I think Loma wins. Hughes, I don't know. I followed her career a little bit. I interviewed her before I interviewed after she lost to Vanessa Demopoulos for the LFA title. A fight, by the way, she was winning. She ended up getting submitted late in the fight. When I watched that fight against her and Tisha Torres, and granted that was on short notice, she didn't look UFC ready. And I think Loma's going to win this fight. That's my take on it. And I like Sam Hughes. She's a Pacific Northwester like us, John. So, shout out to her. But she did not look UFC caliber in that last fight. Maybe she's improved since then, but it looked, and granted Tisha Torres is a tough debut, but
very good.
It didn't look good for her. Like at least with Lupi Godinez, when she fought a couple weeks ago, she was in that fight. In fact, some people thought she won against Jessica Penne, but Sam Hughes was out of there in the first round, and it was a stoppage because of an injury. But she was on her way to getting pummeled, I think.
Yeah, it was like a deer in headlights situation for her in that first fight. I think she's gonna do a lot better, but I feel Loma has just too much experience, and she's getting bigger for the division. And that's striking, man. I don't think it goes to the ground. I think it's just gonna be striking, and Loma's a world-class striker.
Here's a good fight. Cub Swanson, Giga Chikaze. J Spec Driver asked that. Is my pick for fight of the night. Who do you got? I got Cub for the old school. By the way, yes, you're right. It should definitely be a candidate for fight of the night. Who do you got? So I picked Giga, but here's the thing. Like, Swanson's turning back the clock a bit, right? That last fight against Daniel Pineda, he looked outstanding. I think he's at the right camp now, working with those guys over there with Juan Archuleta, TJ Dillashaw, Ortega, that sort of super camp in California. He's really looked rejuvenated. And Giga Chikaze, I've said it before, I think the guy's a little overrated. And what I mean by that is the guys that he's beating are not like a Jamie Simmons, and we're talking about this guy being a title challenger all of a sudden. Like, come on, people. Like, you got to look at the level of competition. Erwin Rivera, bantamweight. And I know you got to fight the guys you're supposed to fight, but he is yet to get that big win. This is a good opportunity for him here against a guy in Cub who's 37 years old. But Cub's a guy that's shown, hey, you know what? Yeah, I had a bad losing streak, but look who I lost to. It's a case of two fighters kind of, with Swanson, it's about proving he's a contender. It's about, still, and for Giga, it's the same thing. It's like, am I that good? If you go out there and finish a Cub Swanson, yeah, you're good. Absolutely. I'm not going to take that away from you, but I don't know that yet. I don't know. I mean, this guy, again, good camp, another King's MMA product. He could do that this fight. That's why I'm picking him, and he's younger, and I think there's more upside, but you can't count out Cub Swanson, man. So I was even telling people on my show, if you're going to bet that fight, go with the underdog. I think Swanson absolutely is a live dog in that fight.
I talked to a coach, right? A striking coach, and this coach coaches some of the best fighters in the featherweight division. He told me that Giga Chikaze is a problem. He told me, like, this guy, when he rounds out and he gets that experience, this guy's gonna be fighting for the title. And he doesn't even coach. He doesn't even coach him. He just told me that. I was just like, what, for real? Because I'm with you, James. I'm like, he hasn't really proven much to me, man. He's had some good performances, but they haven't been like spectacular, right? So Cub Swanson is that, like, can you get past this barricade of Cub Swanson? Can you get past it? Then I'll start to kind of believe the hype a little bit. But I'm gonna take I think I'm gonna take Giga in this one, man. I think he's gonna be able to do it because Cub Swanson's gonna sit there and stand with him. And this dude is a striker, like born striker.
He might not.
Right?
Maybe he gets smart and he says, you know what? It's like, maybe it's like a Caitlin Chukagian and Anthony Shevchenko situation where it's like, look, I can take you down and probably win this way. So we'll see. I can't see Cub being that reckless at this point in his career. He's got a family. It's like, come on, like you gotta get that W. That's the most important thing. I know there's 209er talking about the Diaz slander. Look, we're just being real. I like the Diaz brothers. We have to be realistic about where they're at in their career, right? Like it's, they're not fighting for a title. They're not. It's just is what it is. And on that note, Vipula says, you think Leon Edwards has a chance of taking Usman's fight from Covington? I do, only because Usman team is very adamant about not fighting Colby. And that's a combination of Usman and his manager. Dana wants the fight, so it's a matter of can they come to terms. I know Colby, when I spoke to him on Sunday, said he was talking to Dana on Monday. I haven't heard an update since then. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that fight, because my thing is like, I don't think there's a right answer here, right? Like Leon on merit absolutely deserves a shot. 8-fight unbeaten streak. And even a win over Diaz doesn't really give us much. Colby's the only guy who's fought Usman to a close fight. Yes, he got finished, but it was a 5th round finish. So from that standpoint, I think that makes sense, but I don't know. And then Wonderboy's a fresh matchup if he beats Gilbert Burns. Like there's a lot at play here. So I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I don't know how you see it.
I see Usman just fighting the guy that's going to make him the most money.
That would be Colby. That's what's surprising here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's the fight. If Nate wins, then he's going to take Nate. You know, he already said it, right? He said, if Nate wins, I'm going to get the fight
that's
with
probably
Nate.
What they're waiting for.
Yeah, and he's waiting for that. Yeah. And then if he doesn't get it, then he's going to be like, all right, let's go, Covington. Let's get the deal done. I just hope Covington he doesn't outprice himself or something crazy like that.
No, I don't think that's ever really been the case with him. I think it's more about, you know, who he's being on. Like they offered him Leon Edwards. It's like, I don't blame him for trying to hold out because look, he might get this title shot now without having to fight Leon Edwards. You got to be a little strategic with this. Also, Colby doesn't have a manager, so he's doing this all on his own. So we'll see sort of what how he sort of navigates through this.
He's doing the Jon Jones.
He's doing the Jon Jones. We got about 6 minutes left here on the show. If you guys want to get some more questions in, again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Vipula Barnes, why is Romero Rumble fight? Why isn't the Romero Rumble fight this weekend?
It is this weekend, right?
No, it's not. No, they moved it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why it was moved. There is no Bellator card this weekend, right? It's
Sergio Pettis was fighting this week.
Oh, I'm pretty sure
that's next week. That's May 8th.
Next weekend. It's May 8th. Yeah. So Romero and Rumble are now fighting May 7th. I have no idea why. I don't know. I have no insight, so I can't even speculate at this point. I'm not sure. You have to ask Bellator PR. Danny Brenner, hit him up on Twitter. He'll know. He's the PR guy for Bellator. Let's keep it coming. Any other news we want to talk about here before we Dillashaw being out? That's a bummer. We previewed that last week, or it was last week or week before. I can't remember. I'm glad they're going to reschedule it. I'm actually trying to. I reached out to Corey Sandhagen today to see if I can get an interview with him because obviously they should reschedule that fight. Like some people are like, give him Hyon for an interim title. No, keep the Dillashaw fight intact. It made a lot of sense. Move it, whenever the cut's going to heal up. It sucks for Corey, but I think that's a big fight for him, and he's in a good spot. Like some people are like, give him Dominic Cruz. No, Sandhagen shouldn't have to take a short notice fight when he's at the cusp of potentially getting a title shot here. I think they just should rebook the fight. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely rebook the fight. Like you said, Corey, I think he's a guy that he knows what he needs to do to get closer to the title, and taking like that short notice fight, that's not going to help him at all. Because why? You're taking a chance at losing, right? And I don't think he's going to get anybody that's going to be in the top 5. I don't think it's going to happen. Jan's not going to fight him. Jan's probably in Russia right now, right? He's going to get on a plane right now and fly over. He probably hasn't been training to fight, so it doesn't make any sense. I think Corey, they put that together later on in a couple of weeks, and it'll probably be a crazy. I don't know. Could you put it in a main event? I don't think they have any cards. I think all the main events are pretty stacked up.
Well, no. They'll do. If we're talking Dillashaw Sandhagen being rebooked, they could either put it on one of the pay-per-views or they could just make it as a fight night main event. So like they had for next week. So By the way, we're hearing now that Marina Rodriguez, Michelle Waterson might be the new main event there. I mean, that's a good fight. I kind of wonder what the thinking is there. Are they banking on Michelle being sort of the A side there in terms of her star power? Why not just bump Cerrone and Sanchez? It's Sanchez's retirement fight. I think that's enough to sell. Cowboy Cerrone's he was a headliner at UFC Vancouver a couple of years ago. Why not do that as the main event, or even put Neil Magny and Jeff Neal as the main event?
Yeah, but I think it's because of the 5-round thing. I think because they want a 5-rounder, and I believe the women probably said, okay, we'll go 5 rounds. It doesn't matter. And I think it's a dangerous fight for Michelle Waterson. Just,
Oh, no, of course.
Marina Rodriguez takes her out.
Yeah, Marina Rodriguez looked like the real deal in that last fight. Last question, and then we'll wrap things up here. J-Spec Driver, we're doing PFL, win or lose like Pettis. I don't know much about his opponent. Did you get a chance to speak to Verdum? I was trying to remember. I know you interviewed a lot of the PFL guys, but he's fighting this guy, Henan Ferreira, who is 6-2, and he lost to Brett. He was the guy that lost to Brett Martin in LFA. Brett Martin, by the way, one of the best heavyweights that should be signed to the UFC, is not. He's fighting in XFC now. So he lost to him. He beat Jared Vandera. He hasn't fought since 2019. Yeah, this looks like a mismatch. Verdum's 24-9-1. The guy he's fighting has 8 fights. I would assume Verdum wins, but you know what? After that last week, I'm not expecting anything. And I will say one thing that I don't think a lot of people have mentioned about those a couple of the upsets last week. The layoff. Those guys didn't get to fight in 2019. Bubba Jenkins fought a ton of times. I think Marcin Held got a couple of fights in as well. So I think that did impact those guys. So we'll see. We'll see for that PFL cards. When is that? The Verdum fight. It's May 6th. So that's next week for the PFL. So
yeah.
There you go. Actually, we'll get one more here. J-Spec Driver says, anyone in the media excited about Clarissa Shields coming to MMA? I am. I think it's very interesting because we've not seen a boxer come over that's as young as she is and is still as good. And by the way, she's still going to do boxing on top of that. Very interesting. I think she's going to do well, and she's at the perfect camp. Why not go train with Holly Holm? She did the same thing. So
yeah, it's good. I don't, I'm looking forward to speaking with her eventually before she makes her debut. I think July. I think that she said for July. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to talking to her and picking her brain a little bit. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. Well, I don't know. If people are complaining about her coming over, I don't know where that's coming from.
Forgot to mention, we got our underdog picks for this week. Shout out to Michael for always keeping us in check here. Well, I already tell you mine. It's Dominic Reyes. This guy is an underdog on Saturday. Look, I know for a fact that there's a possibility of Yuri going out there and knocking out Reyes. I'm going to get so much crap, just like I would have if Rose would have lost last week. But I'm going with him. Look, I think Reyes has a chance to win. I think he can. I don't think his chin is as gone as people have said. He's only got one loss via stoppage. I think he's got a shot at plus 115. So he's going to be my underdog pick. There's a few dogs I like in here, but he was one of them that stood out to me. Who do you like as your underdog pick?
There's a lot of close fights if you look at the line. So, if you pick an underdog, it's not really an underdog because it's so close, right? But I'm going to say two. I'm going to give you two.
I'll give another one as well. Yeah.
I'm going to give you Dustin Jacoby. He's the underdog against Ian Kutulaba.
I was looking at him
and then I'm looking at Cub Swanson, man. Maybe he's going to, like you said earlier, he's going to turn back the clock. I can see that happening. So
I was thinking of going to Swanson too, but I'll tell you one I like. Randa Marcos. Everyone thinks she's on her way out of the UFC. She's now training with Kevin Holland and Travis Lutter. Finally gets a real camp. I think she'll put it together here. She's got way more experience than her opponent here, who I know is very hyped, Luiana Pinheiro. But Marcos has got 22 fights. She's fighting a girl who's got 9 fights. That's a huge gap in experience. You look who Marcos is losing to. They're good fighters. Murata is a good fighter. She's 11-1. Mackenzie Dern might be fighting for a title soon. Amanda Hebus. I know she had the setback, but still, that's not a terrible loss to have. And this girl's making her debut off Contender Series, beating Stephanie Frost, who is 8-6. I'll take my chances on Marcos getting a decision. She always seems to just when you think she's going to get cut, she bounces back. And this seems like a fight to do it. This was rescheduled. Of course, Marcos had COVID. I'm not sure the symptoms and get a chance to talk to her. But yeah, I'll go my 2 underdog picks. I'll go Reyes and Reyes and Marcos. Those will be my 2 picks. I think last week I hit both my picks, right? Because they were, what did I go? I went Rose, and then I think there was another one too, but whatever. Well, I'm not going to gloat too much. So it happens every now and then. All right. Good time to wrap up the show here, everyone. If we didn't get to your question, just post it in the comments. We'll get back to us or hit us up on Twitter. Before we go, John, anything you got coming up this week that you want to plug?
Nah, just go to my my page and or just follow me on JHK MMA on social media, and you can find all my interviews there. And shout out to Michael in the back producing all this. He's awesome,
man. My favorite producer. I'll honestly say that he's my favorite. I have a couple producers. No offense to them, but Mike does a great job. So I got to give him a shout out here as well. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports, where we're back in business after a little bit of an issue this week with YouTube flagging something on my channel that was completely bogus. Still got the warning though, which is kind of annoying, but hopefully that'll be resolved soon. So I'm back on there. I'm actually going to change my strategy a bit on my channel starting next week. I think I'm going to move some stuff over to the backup channel. Now I'm kind of realizing that maybe my channel is not as safe as I thought, because if something random like this can happen to my channel, maybe it's time to give a little bit more love to that other channel I've got. So I'll be talking more about that tomorrow. I'll be doing the Q&A on my channel. If you missed any questions here today, hit me up on the Q&A. I'll be doing it tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on this video as well. Also, make sure you check out my interviews with Colby Covington, Valentina Schevchenko, and I just dropped it on Middle Easy today. Diego Sanchez got him before his retirement fight against Donald Cerrone. So check that out on the Middle Easy channel. Also, download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. Best app out there, like I said, bar none. Even the UFC app's not as good. Go there, get your picks in, talk some smack. We love it. Got to give a shout out to Fantasy Fanatics for making this happen. We'll be back here a week today talking about another upcoming notable fight. We don't know yet. We'll figure it out over the week. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again. And for me, for John Co. and our great producer, Michael, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching.